The clock keeps ticking, even when you're not. You wake up and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already running, listing, calculating, chasing. There's this silent pressure that whispers, you should be doing more. More learning, more earning, more evolving. You scroll past morning routines of millionaires, 10-step habits of geniuses, and the endless slogans of self-betterment. Grind, hustle, grow. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet fear begins to bloom, the fear that if you ever stop, you'll fall behind. But here's the truth no one tells you. Growth that's forced isn't growth, it's performance. It's the ego trying to prove it's worthy of existing. We've confused becoming better with becoming busier. We think if we keep moving, we're progressing. Yet the more we chase it, the more we feel hollow. The more we push, the more life resists. Imagine a seed. You could shout at it to grow, pull at the soil, stretch its roots with your hands. But nothing you do can rush its timing. It breaks open only when the environment is right, when warmth meets darkness, when stillness surrounds it. You can't command nature. And yet, we try to command ourselves. We treat the soul like a project, the body like a machine, the mind like a battlefield. We've become addicted to the feeling of effort, mistaking exhaustion for progress. We say we're working on ourselves, but often we're just running from stillness. Because in stillness, the noise fades, and what's left is uncomfortable. The doubts, the loneliness, the quiet realization that maybe growth doesn't look like motion. Maybe it looks like sitting still and feeling lost. Carl Jung once said that all neurosis begins as a substitute for genuine suffering. When we can't face our inner pain, we distract ourselves with activity, with the illusion of control. But the psyche doesn't heal through control, it heals through surrender. Growth, in its truest form, is the psyche's natural movement toward wholeness. It doesn't need to be forced, it only needs to be allowed. Yet, we've built an entire culture around the denial of stillness. Every pause is filled with sound. Every silence feels like failure. We've lost the rhythm of being human, the rhythm that includes rest, decay, dormancy. We forget that nature itself breathes in cycles. Trees shed their leaves. Oceans pull back before the next wave. Even the heart, the very symbol of life, contracts and expands, rests and beats. You can feel it when you finally stop. The body trembles, like an engine that's been running too long. The mind resists the silence. It looks for another problem to solve, another goal to chase. But slowly, beneath the noise, something ancient begins to whisper. It's not a command. It's not a plan. It's just presence, awareness without judgment. What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're not growing, but because you're growing in ways you can't yet see? What if the stillness you resist is the very soil of your transformation? We're taught to chase enlightenment like it's an achievement. But perhaps enlightenment is what remains when the chasing ends. Growth has been romanticized as a constant upward climb, a graph always rising. But in truth, it's more like a spiral. You return to old feelings, familiar fears, but from a slightly higher perspective. You feel as though you're regressing when in fact, you're deepening. Stillness isn't stagnation, it's incubation. It's the invisible work that happens when the ego finally steps aside and allows the deeper intelligence of life to move through you. And so, the paradox appears. The more you force yourself to grow, the more you interfere with the process. The more you try to control your evolution, the more you delay it. Like a river that's constantly stirred, your inner waters remain murky. Only when you stop, when the surface settles, does the reflection become clear. You were never meant to bloom all year. You were never meant to live in constant momentum. There are winters of the soul, and they are sacred. They strip away illusion, preparing the ground for new life. When you stop forcing growth, you begin to see that transformation doesn't need your pressure, it needs your patience. So pause. Let the noise fall away. Sit in the stillness you've been avoiding. Feel how life continues without your interference. The world doesn't stop when you rest, it breathes with you. Growth was never something you had to chase, it was something waiting to unfold once you finally stopped running. And when you do, you'll realize something profound. Stillness isn't the opposite of growth. It is growth, the quiet kind, the unseen kind, the kind that turns roots into strength. You were never falling behind. You were just being called to stop, so that you could finally arrive. Surrender. It's a word that sounds soft, almost fragile, like something you do when you've lost. We're taught to fear it. We're told that surrender means defeat, that to let go is to give up, that to yield is to fail. But what if that's the greatest misunderstanding of all? Because real surrender isn't weakness. It's not collapsing. It's not quitting. It's the quiet courage of meeting life on its own terms. Every philosophy that has touched the edges of truth, from Jung to Nietzsche, from the Stoics to the mystics, points back to this. You suffer not because life withholds from you, but because you resist what is. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you think you should be. But you can't become yourself if you're gripping the image of who you were supposed to be. He wrote, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of its morning. To grow, you must release the version of you that's obsessed with control. Control feels safe. It gives us the illusion of power. We make plans, set timelines, set goals. We tell ourselves, if I do everything right, I can make life behave. But life doesn't listen to demands, it listens to truth." Alan Watts said, "When you try to stay on the surface of the water, you sink, but when you try to sink, you float." That's the paradox of surrender. The more you try to control, the less control you have. The more you resist what's happening, the more it grips you. It's like wrestling the ocean. Exhausting, impossible, and unnecessary. The ego, that inner voice always narrating your life, hates surrender. It wants certainty. It wants to know what's next, where it's going, how it's doing. The ego believes that peace can only come after everything is figured out. But surrender is the realization that peace doesn't arrive after clarity, it creates it. When you let go of needing to know, something radical happens. You start to see what's actually there. The constant comparison, the imagined race, the pressure to catch up, they lose their power. You begin to notice the small, quiet moments that were drowned out by your striving. The sound of the morning wind, the slow rhythm of your breathing, the fact that you're still here, still becoming. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of one's fate. He wrote of dancing with what life gives you, even the pain, even the confusion. To love your fate is not to romanticize suffering, but to accept that what comes your way belongs to you, that even the detours are part of your direction. Our modern world despises this idea. We're told to optimize, to hustle, to manifest the perfect timeline. We measure value by velocity. We think life is something to be managed like a business. But the human soul is not a business. It is a mystery, and surrender is how you enter it. Jung believed that what we resist persists, that the things we repress, our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, only grow stronger when we try to banish them. Surrender is not escaping them. It's turning toward them and saying, "I see you. Teach me what I need to learn." It's realizing that the shadow you fear is not your enemy, it's your unintegrated self, begging to be understood. That's why surrender is not passive. It's the most active form of trust. It's a dialogue with existence itself. You stop forcing and you start listening. You stop controlling and you start participating. Look deeper, and you'll see, surrender has always been the language of truth. The Stoics practiced it when they said, focus only on what is within your control, and accept what is not. The mystics practiced it when they called surrender the gateway to divine union. Even in psychology, it's the moment of breakthrough, the point when resistance collapses and something new begins to emerge. Think about it. Every transformation begins with a surrender. The seed surrenders its shape to become the tree. The caterpillar surrenders its form to become the butterfly. Every dawn is born from the surrender of night. And yet, humans try to skip this step. We want to transform without dissolving. We want to grow without releasing. We want the new life, but not the death of the old one. But real change doesn't happen while you're still clutching your former self. It begins when you finally unclench your hands and let the river carry you, not because you gave up, but because you understood that the current knows more than you do. We keep asking, when will I get there? But surrender whispers, you're already there. You're just too busy fighting to notice. The ancient philosophers, the mystics, the poets, they all circle around the same revelation, that the moment we stop trying to force life to obey us is the moment we finally feel life moving through us. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a river, pushing against the current, muscles tense, exhausted. You've been fighting so long you forgot why you started. And then you stop. You exhale. You let go. The current doesn't destroy you. It holds you. It carries you. You begin to move not by force but by flow. That's surrender. Not a collapse but a cooperation. Not the end of effort but the beginning of alignment. It's the art of trusting that what's unfolding is not working against you. It's working through you. That the delays, the disappointments, the detours, they are not punishments, they are preparations. When you stop fighting the moment, life stops fighting back. You begin to see that being behind was never the truth. It was only the illusion created by your need to control how things should unfold. You thought surrender meant losing the story, but it's how you finally step into it. You thought surrender meant silence, but it's how you finally hear the music that's been playing all along. Because the truth is simple, though few believe it, you are not behind. You are simply being guided toward a rhythm your mind cannot comprehend yet. The ego wants straight lines. Life moves in circles. The ego wants certainty. Life offers mystery. The ego wants control. Life invites trust. And somewhere between those two, between resistance and release, lies the only real freedom you will ever find. You thought you were chasing the future. But maybe the future was trying to find you, and all it needed was your stillness. There comes a moment in every life when striving collapses into silence. Not because you stopped caring, but because you simply ran out of ways to force what refuses to move. It's not a breakdown, though it feels like one. It's the space between breaths. The pause after the storm. The stillness that hums with something ancient and alive. You wake up one day and realize, all the pushing, all the planning, all the desperate effort to stay on track, it hasn't brought peace. It's brought fatigue. You've tried so hard to build the perfect life that you've forgotten how to live the imperfect one you already have. This is where surrender begins, not as a choice, but as an inevitability. When the mind can't solve its own suffering anymore, something deeper steps forward. It's a quiet turning. A surrender not to failure, but to reality. A soft, almost imperceptible nod that says, "All right, life. I'll stop fighting you now." It's terrifying at first. You feel naked without your armor of control. You feel foolish for all the years you believed that certainty was safety. But in that vulnerability, something profound happens. The current you've been resisting begins to carry you, gently, patiently, without demand. You start to see that surrender is not an ending. It's a doorway. And the moment you walk through it, you begin to meet life again, not as an enemy to outsmart, but as a companion to learn from. You begin to realize that the universe has always been whispering to you through the things you tried to escape, the rejection that redirected you, the delay that protected you, the ending that made room for something real. You were never behind. You were being realigned. Viktor Frankl once wrote that the last of human freedoms is the power to choose one's attitude toward any circumstance. When he was imprisoned, stripped of everything, he found that surrender was not weakness. It was the only path left to meaning. He discovered that we cannot always control what happens, but we can always decide what it means. And that is where liberation begins. When you surrender, you don't stop caring, you stop clinging. You don't stop working, you stop forcing. You don't stop dreaming, you stop demanding that the dream arrive on your schedule. There's a subtle but sacred shift inside you. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" The energy of resistance transforms into curiosity. You begin to see patterns, how every detour in your past wasn't random, how every heartbreak cracked something open in you that control never could. And suddenly, even your pain starts to make sense. Not because it disappears, but because it becomes part of something larger. You begin to sense an intelligence beneath everything, an order that isn't linear, but alive. You feel it in the timing of things, how certain opportunities arrive the moment you finally stop chasing them, how certain people appear when you've made peace with being alone. This is the paradox of surrender. The moment you stop needing control is the moment you begin to receive everything control was trying to grasp. There's a story in every soul, a storm that led to silence, and a silence that led to seeing. And once you reach that silence, you start to notice beauty again, in the smallest, most ordinary things. A cup of coffee steaming on a table, a quiet morning sky, the way sunlight falls on the floor like forgiveness. You begin to feel gratitude for what is, not just what could be. You begin to see that the present moment, this fragile, fleeting, unrepeatable moment, is not an obstacle to your life. It is your life. The pace slows. Your breath deepens. You start moving differently, not driven but guided. Not chasing but responding. Not in a rush to arrive, but in awe of the fact that you are already here. And with that, a strange kind of peace fills the space where anxiety used to live. Not the peace of everything going right, but the peace of not needing it to. There's an image that fits this feeling perfectly, the universe taking billions of years to form a single star. No hurry. No anxiety. Just patience, infinite patience. And yet, that star burns exactly when it's meant to. Why would your becoming be any different? Why would the rhythm of your life, your setbacks, your pauses, your long detours, be mistakes, when everything in nature unfolds through timing too precise to be random? The truth is, life doesn't waste anything. Not a delay, not a heartbreak, not even a failure. Everything serves your becoming, once you stop insisting it should look another way. And this is the true essence of surrender. It's trusting that the path you're on, however uncertain, is still sacred. It's trusting that what's leaving is clearing space for what's arriving. It's understanding that being behind was only ever a misunderstanding of divine timing. When you reach this point, when you stop struggling to swim upstream, you begin to float. Not because the river has changed, but because you have. You start to see that surrender was never about losing control. It was about realizing you never had it. And somehow, that realization doesn't make you smaller, it makes you infinite. There's a moment, maybe you felt it, where you just breathe and say, if this is where I am, then this is enough. And in that breath, the world doesn't need to change. Your timing doesn't need to catch up. Because you finally understand, nothing was missing. Nothing was late. Everything that's meant for you will not need to be chased. It will meet you when you stop running. That's the moment surrender turns into freedom. The instant where everything slows, and you realize that peace was never waiting on the other side of achievement. It was waiting on the other side of control. So you exhale. You unclench. And for the first time in years, you let life hold you. And it does. You begin to see life differently now. The world hasn't slowed down. It's still noisy, urgent, and demanding, but something within you has shifted. You move through the same spaces, yet you no longer feel the same need to rush. You sit in traffic without that familiar wave of frustration. You check your phone, but it no longer owns your attention. The difference isn't in the world, it's in your rhythm. You've stopped fighting time. You've started flowing with it. Stillness doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging with it fully, without resistance. It's the quiet awareness that walks beside you through every task, every interaction, every ordinary moment. You begin to realize that peace isn't found at the end of activity, it's found within it. You can wash dishes and be still. You can work, move, speak, and still remain anchored in silence. Because stillness isn't about the absence of motion, it's about the presence of consciousness. In this space, even your definition of growth begins to evolve. Growth is no longer about climbing higher, achieving more, or proving your worth. It becomes something softer, a deepening, not a stretching. It's the quiet strength that comes from knowing yourself, from accepting the unfolding of life without constant interference. You begin to sense that the true measure of progress is not how much you accomplish, but how peacefully you exist within what is. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. For the first time, those words make sense. You see how much of your suffering came not from what life was asking of you, but from what you were demanding from it. You realize that peace was never something to reach for, it was what remained once you stopped reaching. Now, growth feels different. It's quieter, but it's real. You start to trust the pauses, those seasons when nothing seems to be happening. You understand they're not wasted time but sacred intervals. Like winter preparing spring, those silences are part of life's rhythm. You don't rush them anymore. You let them breathe. And because of that, your creativity returns, not as a burst of energy, but as a natural flow. Ideas come when they're ready. Insights arise unforced. You no longer chase inspiration, you make space for it. Relationships, too, begin to shift. The need to control how others see you fades. You start showing up more honestly, listening, not performing. People feel it. They can sense the stillness in you, the grounded presence that doesn't need to prove or impress. This is what integration feels like, when wisdom stops being a concept and becomes a way of being. You begin to live from stillness rather than from striving. You let go of the identity of someone who must grow, and instead embody someone who is growing, naturally, constantly, simply by being alive. You find yourself forgiving more easily. You speak more slowly. You notice small things, the texture of morning light, the rhythm of your breath, the spaces between words. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to trust life again. You realize you don't need to see the whole path. You only need to be present for the step you're on. The next one will appear when it's time. The current that once frightened you now feels like guidance. You understand that even the moments of confusion, silence, and loss are part of the same intelligence that once terrified you with its uncertainty. When you stop forcing growth, you rediscover wonder. The smallest things feel alive again. A cup of coffee, a walk outside, the sound of rain. You don't overlook them anymore, because you're not searching for something more. The world begins to glow with the kind of beauty that only still eyes can see. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll return to the same place where your journey began. Maybe the same room, the same chair, the same morning light. But this time, you'll be different. The restlessness that once pushed you to escape will have softened into quiet understanding. The need to become someone else will have dissolved. You'll sit there, doing nothing, and feel the fullness of being alive. The truth is, transformation was never about reaching the next version of yourself. It was about remembering the part of you that has always been whole, the still center beneath every change, the silence beneath every thought. So live your life with that stillness at the center. Move, create, love, and loose. Let things end and begin again. But do it all with the awareness that you don't need to force anything to become beautiful. Life unfolds, with or without your control, and the more you trust that, the more it reveals its grace. When you stop forcing yourself to grow, life begins to grow through you. You don't have to pull at your own roots anymore. You just have to rest in the soil and let the sunlight do its work. Stillness doesn't stop transformation, it is transformation. The river was always moving. You just had to stop thrashing long enough to feel its flow.